on the wall so that people couldn't see me, and I completely lost it. And mental health wise, I wasn't in a good place at all. I don't think I dealt with my grief for 3 or 4 years. I had just got on with it. You know, my resilience, whilst tested, was sustained because I'd just got on with it.
Can you think back to a time where you didn't understand the word resilience and how that affected you in business?
Those life events, you can't plan for those. It's how you deal with it. So the business resilience needs to be as high as your own personal resilience, doesn't it?
Imagine running a business, managing a team and showing up every day whilst your personal life is in absolute chaos. How do you keep going? And more importantly, should you? Today we're talking to Julian Smith. We're talking about what leadership really looks like when life throws everything at you. We're going to be diving deep and talking about resilience and lots of other topics. Julian, thank you for coming to Leaders in Disguise.
No, I've been looking forward to it for a while. Thank you.
We've had this in a diary for a while.
We have.
And really, I should say that every episode I look forward to having a guest in, but I perhaps not been as looking forward to other episodes as I am with this one. But there's a lot to cover.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned the word resilience, and you and I have had a few conversations just before we turned the mics on today. I'm going to start with that question, and we'll go further back in a short while. What does the word resilience mean to you?
Good opening question. In short, to keep going. But that would be somewhat of a churlish reply. I think resilience starts with self-awareness. I think you have to be prepared to challenge yourself. You have to be prepared to look in the mirror. I know we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. It's always in the eyes when you look at yourself in the mirror, and challenge yourself to, by being self-aware, to be able to then work on your resilience as a result of really looking into your inner thoughts and your soul. And I challenge people to say, do you really look at yourself in the mirror? And I didn't do that. And when I started to, you reflect on where you're at, what you do, how you carry on. So in short, resilience to me, as a result of self-awareness, it's to have a plan to build your resilience to keep going, because that's ultimately what it's about, resilience. You have a choice, you stop or you keep going, or the third choice is you do very little and inertia exists. So I think awareness to have a plan that you need to do something about yourself, for yourself, to improve your resilience.
It's an interesting word. It used to really grind me when I heard the word resilience, because I felt like it was just a magic wand, and somebody would say to me, oh, Gary, you just need to be a little bit more resilient, and just, you'll be all right. And
dust yourself down and
or
grow a pair, or whatever the phrases might be.
Or perhaps if I was a little bit more resilient, then I would have been okay. But I don't think it's as clear cut as that, because for me, I now see resilience as a way of bouncing back. When something happens, when we see that, perhaps when we are not self-aware in the moment, and that's a great phrase that you've used. I only in the last couple of weeks, I feel like I've had that conversation a million times. It's particularly with HR teams where they want their employees, their leaders to be more self-aware. But there's that moment where you just aren't. You don't have that capacity. But when you do start to become a bit more aware of your environment, about yourself, then we can start bouncing back.
Bounce back ability.
Maybe that's it.
It is.
It's a bit hard to
answer your question in one word. It's your bounce back ability. I said to keep going, but absolutely, without looking at yourself in the mirror and in depth, can you make the adjustments that you need to make off your life as a result of your work or life experiences that then get you in a place where you're able to introduce the things that build your resilience to keep going, and therefore you're sustainable to carry on leading the life that you want, or aspiring to the life you choose to lead. So
absolutely. I want to jump back a little bit, if I may, at this point.
Yep.
Because you've had an amazing career of so many varied types and different businesses that you've worked in, from the world of clothing. I'd love to know more about that, but we're here to learn about you, I guess.
Yeah.
Can you think back to a time where you didn't might understand the word resilience and how that affected you in business?
That's a good question. I couldn't put my finger on when I understood what resilience meant. I'd probably say it's only in the last 5 to 10 years as to to answer your original question, what I think resilience is about. Back in the day, my mentor, my coach, my support was my father, who happened to be an HR director. And he was the one who provided me the opportunity to talk and share, and a lot of what we both do now in terms of our coaching and our mentoring is an environment where I could share how I felt. Something I've always tried to do for my kids, provide them the environment to say how they really feel. Therefore, that influences and builds their own resilience. I think we probably didn't talk about it back then. So when I was a 28, 29-year-old MD of a £20 million clothing business with 2,000 employees, you're put in that situation by your employers to do the job, and you get on with it. You have a plan, you have set yourselves goals. Leadership and the meaning of true leadership and what's involved with it, to spot and deal with and provide the environment where people's resilience can be built upon. It didn't exist. It really didn't. So how did I learn about it? I probably didn't. I didn't put a label on it until 5-10 years ago, I guess. But nevertheless, back in the days then, I think some of it, in terms of the more pastoral level of support that an HR manager might provide, the opportunity to go and step in their office, sit down and, have a cry if you needed to, get it off your chest. I can't work out what to do with so-and-so. I think that, to some extent, is probably how we dealt with it back then. And again, maybe that's not available as much widely available as an approach, that it might be now. We get buried into books and podcasts and YouTube videos and Instagram and social media and all of that stuff that tells us what it is, rather than us understand what it is and feel what it is. We have an assumption based upon what we see in social media without the greater benefit of our own experience. We align ourselves with what somebody else says and thinks and feels and their own level of experience, whereas self-awareness, going back to what I said about what resilience is to me, is, probably the opportunity when you need to talk to someone. So your question about how I dealt with it back then, I think it's just asking for help, being prepared to go, and that's what it was then. And, who you surround yourself by. We all, coaches, mentors, consultants, advisors now, we all support people in that respect. But one of the things I'll be talking about at a conference next week is 3 Ps: purpose, personal vision, and people. And I look back then thinking about your question is, I guess I identified the people that I valued, whose opinions on general business and life, that's what sustained me. That's what helped influence my resilience back then. It's the people that we would consider now as mentors.
I'm going to come back to that because I know there was a conversation we had just as you walked in, and we always catch up and say, how are you doing, what's going on and what you're up to. I just want to just touch on what you said about your dad though, and like that conversation, because that was, you described it as a HR director, I think probably personnel director back in those
absolutely.
days. And now you've revealed your age, we can use terminology like that.
No, you revealed it, didn't they?
Fair enough. For me, there are dads in society now, not as many as we would like, and I think it's getting better and it's changing. But there are dads that are having conversations like that now in 2025. But that surprises me to hear that you were having those types of conversations back then. Was it as open as we perhaps are about our own mental health and well-being and challenges that we're going through when your dad was supporting you and giving you that opportunity to open up and talk?
Absolutely, I think so. I think what we do now is label everything more than we used to. Everything has to have a label on it. Everything has to be you do this because, fundamentally it's a father supporting his son and providing the environment to speak and asking the right questions. And that's a knack that my dad, God rest him, always managed to have with me. He always provided the opportunity both at home and at work, excuse me, to say, so the question would be, back then, how do you feel? What's on your mind? What shall we chat about today? And that how do you feel question is a question that I often use nowadays. It's how do you feel? And they go, yeah, I'm all right. No, I meant, how do you really feel? And that's the deep question, because they go, and we might label that as I don't know, a direct question, whatever it might be nowadays. And it may sound like an old fart talking about nowadays, but everything has to have a label. Whereas it's, for me, the biggest level and means to support somebody is to understand what empathy is. And that's what my dad was. He was empathetic. He understood. He would be the person who, and that's what's he's taught me, that single most important human asset of empathy. Without empathy, you cannot be supportive. I can hear people arguing that now, but fully supportive, I guess, fully engaged in providing that peer support, that one-to-one support. So yeah, it's how you feeling. That's the question that I used to get asked back in the day.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
We always say, like, how are you doing? And people say, okay. And they often do exactly what you just did there, is that ask that question again.
Yeah.
Ask if the person is saying okay the second time, they are probably okay.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to lie twice.
Absolutely. It's the follow-up. I'm okay. Well, what does okay mean? And that's the follow-up question. And then, okay means okay. Okay. Leave it alone. But it's those simple questions. It's those empathetic, understanding, supportive, caring questions that have to be labelled nowadays, where actually it's just about being aware and caring about your fellow man, isn't it?
You've had an amazing career of things that we won't even get a chance to cover on the podcast. You've obviously gone through the highs and lows of business. Mm-hmm. Can we talk about some of those low points? Happy to.
Yeah, in business or in life, personally, whatever you wish.
In business, I guess we start with business. Yeah, and I know what you're referring to, and perhaps if we get to that, to in life as well, because they link. Yeah. They're challenges. Talk to me about a time in business where you've really had to deal with trying to be that authentic, vulnerable leader, whilst actually having a lot of challenge going on in life and in business.
A number of times, but again, I think back to my sort of early career in running businesses as an MD, managing director. That was a challenge that I hadn't expected. To be fair, I'd set the goal that I'd wanted to have achieved it by the time I was 35, and I was appointed by the time I was 29 because of some restructuring. But my God, imposter syndrome. Why me? How am I going to do this when you compare yourself to a lot of your peers, or the international training programs that were being provided for graduates at the time, and I didn't go through any of that. But so the imposter syndrome kicked in early, and it was at that time that my dad was unwell and sadly passed in '95. That was probably the first real test for losing my dad. Still relatively early in my career, who'd been my mentor, not just my father, as well as my father. To lose him within a year or so of being appointed in this senior position, I really struggled with that. There was the imposter syndrome existing anyway, and then I need somebody to bounce my ideas off. Who have I got? Who do I talk to? And then the associated grief. And I remember a colleague who was as well, had been my boss, but was my mentor, one of my three mentors back in my 20s and at the start of my career. He and I was MD of one business. I'd become MD of the one business. He was MD of another business. And I remember stood in my office and him walking in as I returned to work after the day or whatever it was we used to take off then, after losing my dad. And he walked into my office and as my mentor, he said, "How are you? How are you doing?" And I remember being concerned about everybody who'd seen him walk in the office. I was concerned about the people outside the office, so I stood in my office with my back to a whiteboard on the wall so that people couldn't see me, and I completely lost it. And now we would, somebody would probably say, "You ought not to be back at work yet because your mental health isn't where it should be." But we got on with it. Going back to the very first question about resilience, we just got on with it. And I got on with it. And I remember feeling a bit of a fool breaking down in front of my mentor, who just happened to be the first one that day as I'd gone back to her, who'd asked me, "How you doing?" Nobody had asked me about how I was doing in the previous however many weeks and months it had been. So that was tough. But it also helped, I guess. He asked the right question at the right time. A lot of my emotion came out. I physically dusted myself down. Literally, I thought, no, I'm not going to be that person. And I just got on with it. But I look back and I mental health-wise, I wasn't in a good place at all. I don't think I dealt with my grief for 3 or 4 years. I remember a subsequent New Year at the family home where me and my 3 sisters happened to be in the same room at the same time as the clock struck midnight. And I completely broke down and lost it 3 or 4 years after the passing of my dad, because I had just got on with it. My resilience, whilst tested, was sustained because I just got on with it. But ultimately, you look back now and reflect on that time, my mental health was not where it should have been. I probably made poorly informed decisions, rash decisions. Can't think of any off the top of my head, but I bet it did. I bet it absolutely stifled my performance to a degree. So yeah, does that answer your question?
It does. And I'm just thinking that of your business as well.
Yeah.
Of course, when you're leading a business, when you're in that senior position, whether you're leading a team or leading an organization, when grief is struck, when you are battling your own mental health, you've got to balance everything that is going on. And part of that is making sure that the company performs.
Absolutely. Yeah, and what that then in itself provides is you as the leader of business owner, not the opportunity to really, some might say, wallow in your grief. I would say embrace your grief, recognize your grief, deal with it. So yeah, absolutely. And how many business owners have just even now dust themselves down, get on with it, back at work in their business. The irony being their business, they're back at work in their business. They could choose to take a week off, 2 weeks off, get some support for their loss, but they don't. And talking about loss and talking about the impact on me, I'm talking about the start of my career, 28, 29, losing my dad, and then the last couple of weeks suddenly lost my brother-in-law at the age of 63. So, those life events, you can't plan for those. It's how you deal with it. The people, and I mentioned earlier about resilience and surrounding yourself with the right people, and being able to go back to being authentic as a business leader. We've dealt with, I've dealt with another impact or I'm going through grief. I'm dealing with that grief. I'm aware of it. I'm talking today about it.
I was just going to say, there's that element where until it's happened to you, you don't plan for it because you don't think it's important. It falls so low down your list. And we've had guests on previously. You can think of Heather that's spoken about that very, where she suddenly became ill. If it's not us or something that's going on in our lives that suddenly change everything for us, who's going to run that business? If it's temporary, you need a couple of weeks out, or you're for grief, or you need a couple of weeks out because you are physically unwell, or in a coma, or whatever it might be. Like, that business needs to sustain without you.
So the business resilience needs to be as high as your own personal resilience, doesn't it? And And if, you know, I would challenge and have challenged many people over the last 15 years, particularly working with 130 odd business owners and or advising a number of other businesses. You know, if your business isn't resilient enough to be able to provide the opportunity to take the 2 weeks out, then you've got a problem with your business.
I'm going to come to another unforeseen event shortly.
Yeah.
I'm just going to fire some quick fire questions at you, and we'll
Right.
get through them just to lighten the mood a little
Right,
bit, because
okay.
we've got quite.
Are they
quite
multiple
deep in-
choice, or are they?
Well, I can give you some multiple choices. Yes or no might be some of
Okay.
them, so we'll see where we go.
Yes
to.
and
But,
no.
Again, we talk about your career. What's your proudest moment, in short, over the career that you've had, that you can pick one moment out?
I don't seek great accolades myself. Never have. I like to see others achieve. I like to see my team achieve. But for me, certainly within the last 15 years, genuinely within our small, what is now a franchise that's in 20 odd countries around the world, in 2019, 2019 March, I won our franchisee of the year award. And for some reason, answering your question, that was one of the recent proudest time in business. I mean, my kids are always my proudest achievement. My 3 kids, less so kids now, more big adults, and they always make me proud. Recently, I'd say within what I do from a coaching peer advisory board, it's that franchisee of the year, because that represented me personally, something that had reflected in the journey that I'd had to that point of 9 years within the TAB network, of having a great business to start with and then a very poor business, and then building my business resilience and personal resilience over sort of a 9 to 10 year period to then achieve that award voted for by my peers. That was very special.
Second question of these quick
Yeah.
fire questions,
Yeah.
if I can say it. Quick
Yeah,
fire
yeah.
questions. Just, over your career, if there's one thing you could have changed, one moment that you would have changed over, what would it have been with the hindsight that you now have?
I'm very proud of many of the decisions that we made as a team over the years, but there was a significant restructure went on in the late 90s. Late 90s? I think so. Anyway, it's irrelevant to the listener, but there's a significant restructure. I was a MD of one of the businesses within the division, and I probably had the opportunity, when parts of that division were purchased by a colleague, because our owners had decided within the group that they didn't want to support contract clothing manufacturing anymore, so they were selling it off. I tried to buy one of the businesses, not all of the businesses, and a colleague beat me to the punch. And I remember that within a couple of days of the announcement, going to see him and thinking, well, this is the end of my career as an MD within this clothing division, which proved to be the case. The bit I regret is I should have put myself forward to be a sales director, and my career might have continued to this day within manufacturing and clothing. Who could have known? But I should have preempted that.
Perhaps that little bit of imposter syndrome playing out in there.
Well, it was the
possible?
ego getting in the way. It was I'm an MD, you're an MD. Oh, don't need me as an MD now, because you only need one MD. What I should have done, which is what my core skills were associated with and experience within the commercial side of the business, in the sales side of the business, I should have said, well, I'll be sales director. Life could have been, career-wise, could have turned out very different. Is that a great regret? No. Is it something I could have done differently? Yes. I don't have regrets, I don't think.
My last question, for those people that are watching, that are listening, that are in business right now, they might be doing well, they might be struggling, they might be challenged. What one thing should they be doing to be competitive, to be successful, to be ahead of competitors right now, that you think they need to be, that could adopt in their business?
Encourage vulnerability.
Interesting. Jumping back then, because I'm looking at the clock, and we had lots to talk through. There's 2 main things I really want to try and cover here. We'll get to your other half in a moment.
Yeah.
But you talked about COVID there, and I wanted to jump into that, if I may do, because many people will be surprised that you, or not, that you're going to be open and vulnerable with this, is that you had a difficult time, as many of us did. But this was pre-COVID that you. Well, I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah. So this is associated with being diagnosed as depressed. So I probably had bouts of depression over the years when I look back to, again, probably started with losing my dad back in the mid-90s and subsequent life events after that. But what you're referring to there was pre-COVID, a bad relationship one relationship had gone sour that somebody had been with for 12, 13 years. And then there was a relationship for just over a year that was toxic, to say the least. And the impact when you're trying to push water uphill to achieve something that you believe in passionately. I believed in the partner at the time passionately, but it was timing that was all wrong, and the stress associated with leaving one relationship into that relationship, that not heading in the way that I'd wanted it to and that I'd visioned it would be, had a significant impact, created a great deal of anxiety for me. Anxiety is associated with depression. And I started seeing a counsellor off the back of being and having gone to the GP with this extent of the anxiety that I had, telling me that you're depressed. Again, a loose term thrown around. What does that mean? What does it look like? What does it mean to me? It means something different to you as it does to me, but I'm sure. But what it meant to me was to get help, to be vulnerable. So that was a real 2017, 18 into 19 was a really tough time. But as a result of being prepared to be vulnerable, I sought counselling and help, and I still have that help nowadays because it's good to have that safe environment where you can go and, what I use it for nowadays is to just make sense of what you're thinking because our thoughts aren't always clear.
I think, I've got an amazing coach that I've been working with, and she's always said to me, look, this is an opportunity for you to verbally process what, and I feel like in our head it gets a bit jumbled up, but when we have to find the words, the structure to be able to describe it to somebody else, it starts to make a bit more sense because you say to yourself, oh, that sounds silly, or you word it in such a way that you make more sense of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can. It's like out of body experiences when I go and see my counsellor, because I can see myself sat on a couch a bit like this. I verbal diarrhea, and I'm talking to myself. I'm not talking to her. I'm talking to myself, and I'm using the opportunity to just chuck it all out there, and I rationalise it, and end up thinking, well, I don't feel like that. I feel like this because, and you go away with clarity. And I have to say, a lot of lessons through counselling over the last 6, 7, 8 years, and the value that it's represented to me. I think I've recognised I try and provide a similar environment in many respects for the people that I work with and support, because for me it's about focus. I come out of counselling refocused. I always try in my mind is to have a part of the agenda and the environment which I'm providing the one-to-one opportunity for a business leader or a business owner is that they go away more focused than they might have been when they walked in the room.
It's interesting how we turn mentors and coaches into, I'm not going to say unofficial counsellors or therapists, because we're not there to do that, and it'd be wrong of us and irresponsible to do that.
Absolutely.
But even sat here, I do often feel like I am perhaps that light touch counsellor, if that's ever a thing, and I don't want to. I really don't want to own that phrase because it's dangerous if I do. But we are, again, use that pathway word. We are those that help people on that pathway to go and seek help. And I don't know about you. There's times where I've recommended that people go and get a counsellor.
Absolutely.
And get that. And
I'd
recommend it now.
I absolutely. I've been with somebody this morning who is a client who's benefiting off having had a conversation about the need to seek some counselling support over a specific thing, and that person is thriving. And it's knowing our own limits and boundaries, because whilst we want to help and support, what we're not is trained and educated in providing the right type of support and diagnosis associated with counselling and or therapy and whatever else you want to call it. So to signpost, one of our skills, doing what we do, is to know what is the right point at which you signpost somebody to something and why.
And I'm really pleased that you described that person you were with earlier this morning, that you appreciate the confidentiality of it as well, as you, of course. But that person that you were this morning, you said thriving, doing really well. Oh. And it's like that measurement of, and it frustrates me, so I'll get back in my box in a moment, when people describe depression, anxiety, poor mental health, challenging mental health. I think you saw I was on the BBC radio yesterday randomly talking about this. I've got to say we have quite a decent size audience on Leaders in Disguise, but not quite the size of the audience that was listening to me yesterday on Jeremy Vine mentioned. And it was just talking about that, hearing the overdiagnosis phrase and saying, actually, we shouldn't do that and we need to lessen the diagnosis. But they were all talking about it in a negative context. And I was going, there are people that are doing extremely well that just need a little bit of support, because they are absolutely the people that are holding our economy together right now.
Absolutely.
So let's give them that opportunity.
Absolutely. It's two words there that stand out. One is to provide opportunity rather than diagnosis. One's emotive, one's supportive. And absolutely, so many people out there that can make the difference to what's going on economically, as a nation, and without going down those rabbit holes, but provide the opportunity for people. They only need, this, going back to the spirit of signposting people. Some of our thriving entrepreneurs or our budding entrepreneurs, they're entrepreneurs because they have a vision. One, they don't want to work for anybody, but two, they have a vision associated with a passion and a sense of purpose to go and do what they want to do and achieve what they want to achieve. And often in that journey, it's just about giving them opportunity. And that opportunity might just be to sit and give them a bit of free time, or invite them into not a competitor, but into somewhere where they're going to thrive, and they don't have to pay for it, or there's no cost associated with it, or there's it doesn't take a lot to create inspiration as a result of being supportive by making yourself available. And there's so many people out there who just need that little bit of confidence creating, just that little shove.
Little support.
Shove is probably not the right word. Support is the better word.
We are vastly running out of time, and I know there's a conversation I wanted to have today, if I may. Yeah. Because we've had this conversation many times now, and I've started to create a bit of a reputation for talking about this word selfishness, and people, and in a positive way, if you've not heard this podcast before, by the way. But I put a poll out today just to see what people's whether they see selfish as a positive leadership or negative leadership when they hear the word selfish. But you're probably one of the most selfless people that I know. You go out and help lots of people. I acknowledge the commercial side of it. Absolutely, I do. Yeah. We've all got to pay the bills, but you clearly enjoy it. You want people to do well, and you want them to succeed. But I think there's times where, if I may, knowing you for quite a while, say to you, perhaps not as selfish as you should be. And I would draw it to your current other half, which we can name, we can talk. I know she's not here today. Yeah, Deborah, she's had a difficult old time recently, where, again, I'll let you I'll let you describe, and you are still a leader. You're still trying to balance the world of business, whilst, like all of us, we have, I say, and I don't mean to invalidate, normal things happen to normal people. Yeah. You've been going through normal things that we experience whilst trying to be a non-exec and have this amazing franchise going. But I'll let you tell a story.
So I met Deborah in 2019, in the June, and Obviously, within a short period of time, we go into COVID and lockdown, and so we'd known each other, I don't know, 8-9 months, and for us, we embraced the lockdown because it was a time for us. And I said to her 2 weeks in, I think, there's nobody I'd sooner spend lockdown with than her. We married in April 2022, and in February 23, she found a lump in her right breast. And since then, I'm allowed to swear.
You can swear if you want to.
It's been a shit show for her.
That's not too bad.
I could use worse. So she's had 23. She had two surgeries and chemo and everything that's associated with that. And somebody had said to us, as they did at Christmas 2023, that she got the all clear, that 2024 would have been even worse than 2023. We'd have probably thought again whether she'd gone through the treatment in the first place, because her road to recovery has been, for her and for us, more challenging than we could have ever imagined. So that impact on my own personal mental health, well-being. You mentioned selfish.
Selfish.
I absolutely, and thank you for what you said about being selfless, but you do become, there is a need. It's been challenging, absolutely challenging, as to avoid being selfish, because you're about supporting the person you care about the most in your life, and supporting them through what they're going through. But I guess I could have embraced being selfish a little more last year, particularly. To be selfish last year would have been about putting my own mental health and well-being higher up the chart, up the list of to-dos, as I might have done. And as a result of not doing that, I wasn't a good version of myself last year. At one stage, shared with me was the principle of compassion fatigue, which I'd never heard of before. And my wife, God bless her, said that to me, challenged me at some stage last year. Not challenged me, she shared it with me. Do you feel you're feeling this? It never would have even crossed my mind. But you do. It is tiring. It's tiresome to see somebody. You just want to, I'm a fixer. That's why I do what I do, because I help fix things. I couldn't fix that, and that was frustrating. And therefore, going back to where we started about resilience, my resilience, particularly last year, has been, when I look back, massively tested, because I wasn't selfish enough.
Yeah, and I hear you use that word, and thank you for continuing to use it, because we do use it in a negative context. It's that that parenting that we have, good or bad, where we get told that we need to not be selfish and share, but you're not putting yourself above others. What you're doing is you're actually making sure that you are full as much as you can be, to put your mask on, to make sure that you're okay and you're there, and then you can support other people.
Absolutely. And I was a view was shared with me by a colleague that I had become selfish last year. But in the context in which we're talking about it, absolutely I wasn't. I had become a bad version of myself because I wasn't selfish enough. And my insides turn over when I use that word selfish, because selfless is what I am. I try to be. For those who all think I've been selfish over the years, I apologise. But it's an emotive word, being selfish. It's not something you aspire to be and associated with. I'm not a selfish person. It's being selfish, to be prepared, aware, vulnerable, to put the need for your own sense of well-being and improvement and mental health. It's that self-awareness. It goes back to where we started the conversation about looking in the mirror. I didn't look in the mirror well enough last year.
Because you were so focused on.
Because I was so focused on her, but
yeah.
and I could have been a better version of myself to do even more for her when I look back now.
Do you know, it's really
Yeah,
important. And a friend of mine reminded me of this only yesterday. Is that circles of influence? And I'm getting a bit corporate and forgive me. My mother watches lots of people, friends, but that circle of influence and a circle of compassion. And there are things that are outside of your control, way beyond that you really shouldn't be concerning yourself with.
Yeah.
But the most selfless of us all do start to think about those, and we want to make sure that those people are okay.
Yeah.
And we've got to look a little bit closer to home and the confines of the things that we can control within our own bubble, within our immediate vicinity. Those are the things that we need to do, because when they're together, it's a bit. Again, I'm using another model here, Maslow's hierarchy. Yeah. When we build on our foundations and we are in the best place we possibly can be with our foundations, the strength, I'm shaking my hands when I'm saying it, because I'm saying the strength, the weight that is being carried by those foundations can carry that weight, but it can't do very well if we're not looking after our foundations, we're not looking after us.
Absolutely. The foundations is critical. And my foundations are, the cement had started to drift away. Because there's another word other than selfish. It's about self-aware again, to put yourself, if you fuel yourself, if you fuel your own tank and you're empty and you're fully charged as best as you can be, then you are a better version of yourself to provide the love, support, care that you want to for your loved ones, for the people that you work with. And so it comes full circle back to be self-aware, to know when you're not at your best, to choose to do something about it, to build your own level of resilience, to be the better version of yourself that you want to be, to do what you want to do and provide the love, care, support that you want to for others, whether that be in business or your personal life. So I wasn't self-aware enough last year.
That brings us to a beautiful end to this conversation. I have got one little question that I want to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've done so much and you've achieved so much and going to continue to, because absolutely I'm seeing you going fighting here, like continue to add and help and support.
I hope so.
What do you want to be known for when you finally leave this earth? How do you want to be remembered?
I cared for the people that I love, the people that I support, the people that I've been in leadership positions of and managerial positions. I cared enough to help.
Fabulous. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Of course, people are going to want to just go and find out and go, who is this guy? I'm sure
obviously.
There's plenty. If you don't know him, Julian Smith, how can we find you online? What's the best place?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Just look me up, Julian Smith.
We'll put some details in the show notes so people can come and find you.
I was going to give out my Instagram account, but I won't. But if you do want to follow me on Instagram, that's personal stuff, so I don't expect me to post very often, but Julian.Smith1965 is my Insta, but Julian Smith, the Alternative Board, YMCA Derbyshire, is my LinkedIn stuff.
We've not even touched on.
We've not even touched about YMCA.
Perhaps another part two.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything that we have missed today that we haven't spoken about that you wanted to make sure we got across, that we were able to tell everybody?
No, it's. We're talking about life, aren't we? We're talking about, for me, I think the bit around what resilience is, the opening question, the things that have been going through my head have been about honesty, openness, authenticity. But the most important thing is what I said to you at the start about being prepared to look in the mirror.
Brilliant.
And being honest with ourselves.
Fantastic. Well, thank you.
No, thank you.
Of course, people will want to come and sit where you are.
Yeah.
And it's a bit cold in here today, I think, because it's
my feet are
be
falling off now.
Next time. Yeah, we'll get the heating back on now. But thank you. If people want to come on, of course, you know where we are. If you send an email through to hello@leadersindisguise.com, you can find us on socials. Please click subscribe. If you click subscribe, not only does it help so you get to see episodes when they go live, but it also helps us. We can start telling people about what's going on. We can attract some investment into the Leaders in Disguise. We can start spending more money on advertising and grow what we're doing, because conversations like this with yourself, Julian, have been really important. So please do what you need to do. Join the community that we've built. Thank you very much. Thank you, Julian.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Opened my mind, and I'm certainly going to be leading with more intention and a lot more self-awareness. So thank you.
My job's done for the day.
Absolutely.
Thank you.